The blizzard hit 3 days before Christmas in 1878, catching Victoria Brighton on the mountain pass between Leadville and Denver, Colorado, with nothing but her horse, a saddlebag of clothing, and the last of her courage. She had been running from a forced marriage arrangement back in St. Louis for nearly 2 weeks, and now it seemed the Rocky Mountains themselves would claim what her father's business associate could not. The wind howled like a wounded animal, snow stinging her face until she could barely see her mare's ears, and when the dark shape of a cabin materialized through the white curtain of the storm, Victoria did not care who owned it or what dangers might lurk inside. Freezing to death seemed far more certain than any human threat. She slid from her horse, her fingers so numb she could barely grip the reins, and stumbled toward the structure. The door gave way under her weight, and she tumbled inside with a gasp, snow swirling in behind her. Warmth hit her face, blessed warmth from a fire burning in a stone hearth, and a voice, deep and startled, spoke from the shadows. "What in God's name?" Victoria looked up from where she had fallen on the rough wooden floor, her vision still adjusting to the dim interior. A man stood near the fireplace, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell past his collar and eyes the color of whiskey in lamplight. He wore a worn shirt and suspenders, his sleeves rolled up despite the cold outside, and he held a tin cup in one hand as if she had interrupted his evening coffee. "Please," she managed through chattering teeth. "My horse. Outside, she will die." The man did not hesitate. He set down his cup and grabbed a heavy coat from a peg near the door, pushing past her into the storm without another word. Victoria pulled herself to her feet, her legs unsteady, and moved closer to the fire. Her fingers burned as feeling returned to them, and her wet clothing clung to her skin beneath her coat. She heard sounds from outside, the whinny of her mare, the man's low voice speaking soothing words, and then he was back inside, snow dusting his shoulders like powdered sugar. "There is a lean-to on the south side," he said, closing the door firmly against the wind. "Your horse is with mine. She will be all right." He turned to look at her properly then, and his expression shifted from concern to something more guarded. "Who are you, and why are you traveling alone in this weather, Victoria Brighton?" she said, deciding honesty was her only option. "And I did not know there would be a storm. The weather was clear when I left Leadville this morning." "This morning?" He stared at her. "Leadville is a full day's ride in good weather. You could not have possibly thought to make Denver before nightfall." "I was not trying to reach Denver," Victoria admitted. "Just distance, just anywhere that was not where I was." He studied her for a long moment, his gaze taking in her quality coat, now soaked and ruined, her impractical leather gloves, the way her dark hair had come loose from its pins and hung in wet tangles around her face. She could see him making calculations, drawing conclusions, and she lifted her chin slightly, refusing to show weakness beyond what the cold had already forced from her. "I am Isaac Frost," he said finally. "This is my cabin. You are welcome to stay until the storm passes, but that may be days, not hours." That sky looked like it means business. "I have money," Victoria said quickly. "I can pay for lodging." "I am not running a boarding house," Isaac replied, a hint of amusement in his voice. "But you should get out of those wet clothes before you catch your death. I have extra shirts and some old trousers that might fit you well enough. You can change behind that curtain there." He gestured to a corner of the cabin where a faded piece of cloth hung from a rope, creating a small private space. Victoria nodded, too cold and tired to argue about propriety. He brought her the clothes, laying them on a stool near the curtain, and turned his back while she retreated to change. The cabin was a single room, she realized, taking in the simple furnishings as she stripped off her wet things. A bed in one corner, the fireplace, a small table with 2 chairs, shelves holding supplies and what looked like books and very little else. Isaac Frost lived simply, whoever he was. The shirt was soft flannel, worn from many washings, and smelled faintly of pine smoke and something else, something masculine and not unpleasant. The trousers were too large, and she had to roll them several times at the waist and ankles, but they were dry and warm, and that was all that mattered. When she emerged from behind the curtain, Isaac was stirring something in a pot over the fire. "Coffee is hot," he said without looking at her, "and I have some stew left from supper. You should eat." "Thank you." Victoria sat gingerly in one of the chairs, accepting the bowl and cup he handed her. The stew was simple, venison and potatoes and carrots, but it tasted like the finest meal she had ever eaten. She realized she had not eaten since dawn, and even that had been just some dried meat and hard biscuits. They ate in silence, the wind howling outside, the fire crackling in the hearth. Victoria watched Isaac over the rim of her cup, trying to determine what kind of man he was. He moved with a quiet confidence, economical in his gestures, and there was a carefulness to the way he avoided looking at her directly that suggested he was aware of the unusual nature of their situation. A single woman and a single man, she assumed he was single given the state of the cabin, alone together in a snowstorm. It was the stuff of scandal back in St. Louis. "Are you a prospector?" she asked finally, breaking the silence. "Was," Isaac said. "I found enough silver 3 years ago to buy this land and build this cabin. Now I trap, hunt, keep to myself mostly. The mine played out last spring. You not get lonely?" He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but lonely is better than the alternative I knew before." Victoria wanted to ask what he meant, what had driven him to this isolated existence, but the look on his face told her that particular door was closed. She understood that well enough. She had her own doors she preferred to keep shut. "You still have not told me why you were running," Isaac said, turning the question back on her. "My father arranged a marriage," Victoria said simply, "to a business associate. A man older than my own father with 2 grown children and a reputation for cruelty. I refused. He insisted, so I left." "Where were you planning to go?" "I have an aunt in San Francisco," Victoria said. "Or I did last I heard. We corresponded some years ago. I hoped she might take me in until I could find work, make my own way." Isaac snorted softly. "San Francisco is a long way from Leadville, especially in winter. You would never have made it alone." "I was managing," Victoria said defensively. "You were freezing to death on a mountain pass," Isaac countered. "That is not managing. That is dying slowly." The bluntness of his words stung, perhaps because they were true. Victoria set down her cup with more force than necessary. "Well, thank you for your honesty, Mr. Frost. I can see why you prefer solitude to company." Instead of taking offense, Isaac laughed, a rusty sound as if he did not use it often. "You have spirit," he said. "I will give you that. Most society ladies I have known would have swooned or wept by now. I am not most society ladies." "No," he agreed, his expression softening slightly. "I suppose you are not." The storm raged for 3 days and nights without pause. Victoria had never seen so much snow, coming from the city where storms were measured affairs, not this wild onslaught that seemed determined to bury the entire mountain range. The cabin became their entire world, and they fell into an uneasy rhythm of coexistence. Isaac gave her the bed, insisting he was accustomed to sleeping on the floor near the fire. Victoria protested, but he was immovable on the subject, and she was too exhausted to argue for long. She would wake in the night sometimes to find him sitting by the fire, feeding it logs, keeping the cold at bay, and she wondered if he slept at all. During the days, they talked little at first, circling each other like wary animals. Isaac tended to his traps when the wind died down enough to venture outside, checking on the horses, bringing in more firewood from the covered pile on the north side of the cabin. Victoria tried to make herself useful, cooking their simple meals, mending a tear in his coat she had noticed, organizing his chaotic shelves until he asked her, politely but firmly, to stop rearranging his supplies. It was on the second night, when the darkness pressed close and the wind seemed to shake the very foundations of the cabin, that Isaac produced a worn deck of cards from a wooden box under his bed. "You play?" he asked, shuffling them with practiced ease. "Some," Victoria admitted. "My brothers taught me poker before my mother found out and forbade it. Poker it is, then." Isaac dealt the cards and they played for matchsticks, having nothing else to wager. Victoria discovered he was good, reading her tells with an ease that was both frustrating and impressive, but she won her share of hands, and by the time they finished, she was laughing at something he had said, a joke about a prospector and a mule, and the sound of her own laughter surprised her. "You should do that more often," Isaac said quietly, gathering the cards. "Do what?" "Laugh. It suits you better than the worried look you have been wearing." Victoria felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the fire. "I have not had much to laugh about recently." "No," Isaac agreed. "I suppose you have not. But you are safe here, Victoria. Whatever you left behind in St. Louis cannot reach you in this storm." The use of her given name, spoken in his low voice, sent an unexpected shiver through her. They had been observing formalities, Mr. Frost and Miss Brighton, but something had shifted during the card game. Some wall had come down brick by brick. "Call me Isaac," he said, as if reading her thoughts. "If we are going to be stuck here together, we might as well dispense with the niceties." "Isaac," she repeated, testing the name on her tongue. "And I am Victoria, though my brothers used to call me Tori when we were young." "Tori," he said softly. "I like that." They played cards every evening after that, and the games became the highlight of Victoria's days. Isaac taught her variations she had never learned, games with names like 7-card stud and 5-card draw, and she discovered she had a knack for bluffing that made him shake his head in mock despair. They talked during the games, long, rambling conversations that covered everything and nothing. He told her about his time in the war, fighting for the Union, the things he had seen that had made him crave silence and solitude afterward. She told him about her childhood in St. Louis, her mother's death when she was 12, the way her father had changed afterward, becoming hard and distant, caring only for his business and his standing in society. "He used to read to me," Victoria said one night, studying her cards without seeing them. "Before my mother died. He would do all the voices, make me laugh. After she was gone, it was like that man disappeared. I grieved for both of them." Isaac reached across the table and covered her hand with his own, a brief touch that was over almost before it began, but it left her skin tingling. "People deal with loss in different ways," he said. "Some of us run to the mountains and hide. Some of us bury ourselves in work. Neither way is wrong necessarily, but neither way is whole either." "Is that what you are doing here?" Victoria asked. "Hiding, maybe," Isaac admitted. "Or maybe I am just trying to find a different way to live. The world down there in the cities and towns, it did not fit me anymore after the war. Too loud, too crowded, too full of people who did not understand what we had seen, what we had done. Up here I can breathe." Victoria thought about that as they continued their game. She understood in a way. Her own running had been from different demons, but the impulse was the same. Escape. Freedom. The chance to be someone other than who everyone else expected you to be. On the fourth day, the storm finally broke. Victoria woke to brilliant sunshine streaming through the cabin's single window, and silence, blessed silence after the constant howl of wind. She rose from the bed to find Isaac already awake, standing at the window and looking out at a world transformed. "The pass will be closed for weeks," he said without preamble, "maybe until spring. Even if you wanted to continue on, there is no way through." Victoria joined him at the window, and her breath caught. Snow covered everything in smooth drifts taller than a man, the surrounding pines bent under the weight of it, and the sky was a brilliant, painful blue that hurt to look at. It was beautiful and terrible all at once. "So I am trapped here," she said, meaning it as a statement, but it came out sounding like a question. "We both are," Isaac replied. He turned to look at her, and she saw concern in his eyes and something else she could not quite name. "I have enough supplies for one person to last the winter comfortably, enough for two if we are careful. But Victoria, you need to understand what this means. Months possibly, just the two of us in this cabin. If anyone found out, your reputation would be destroyed." "My reputation is already destroyed," Victoria said with more bitterness than she intended. "The moment I ran away, I became unmarriageable in my father's world. I chose this, Isaac. Maybe not the snowstorm specifically, but I chose to leave everything behind. I will face whatever consequences come." He studied her face for a long moment, and she held his gaze, refusing to look away. Finally, he nodded. "All right then, we will make it work, but I will sleep in the lean-to with the horses some nights to give you privacy. And we will maintain whatever proprieties we can, for your sake if not for mine." "That is ridiculous," Victoria protested. "You will freeze out there. We are both adults, Isaac. We can conduct ourselves appropriately under the same roof." "Can we?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning. Victoria felt her pulse quicken as she realized what he was really asking, what he was really worried about. The attraction between them had been growing steadily, unspoken but undeniable, in the casual touches as they passed each other in the small space, in the way their eyes met and held across the card table, in the sound of his voice saying her name in the darkness. "Yes," she said firmly, though she was not entirely sure she believed it. "We can." The days that followed fell into a new pattern. They worked together to make the cabin more comfortable for extended habitation, hanging blankets to create a more substantial private area for Victoria, reorganizing the limited space to give them each some small corner to call their own. Isaac showed her how to check his trap lines, though she was squeamish at first about the dead rabbits and occasional fox they found. He taught her to shoot his rifle, setting up targets in the snow, standing close behind her to adjust her stance until she could hit a pine cone at 20 paces. "You are a natural," he said, genuine admiration in his voice. "I am motivated," Victoria replied. "If I am going to survive out here, I need to know how to take care of myself." They spent evenings reading aloud from his small collection of books, taking turns with the voices as her father once had. Isaac was partial to adventure stories, tales of the sea and distant lands, but he also had a worn copy of Shakespeare's sonnets that he admitted, sheepishly, to reading when he could not sleep. Victoria found herself treasuring those evenings most of all, sitting by the fire with Isaac's voice washing over her, feeling safer and more content than she had in years. January arrived with more snow and bitter cold that made even stepping outside an ordeal. They stayed close to the fire, conserving their energy and their firewood, and it was then that Isaac taught her to play more complex card games, wagering stories instead of matchsticks. "If I win this hand," he said one night, You have to tell me the most trouble you ever got into as a child." Victoria laughed. "And if I win, I will tell you mine." She lost barely and found herself recounting the time she and her brothers had borrowed a neighbor's carriage without permission and crashed it into a fountain in the town square. "My father was furious," she said, smiling at the memory despite herself. "But my mother just laughed and laughed. She said the look on old Mrs. Henderson's face was worth the cost of repairs." "What happened to your brothers?" Isaac asked. "You have not mentioned them much." Victoria's smile faded. "They died," she said quietly. "Both of them. Thomas in the war, like so many others. Daniel from cholera the year after. That was when my father truly became a stranger. He had lost his wife and both his sons. I think I was just a reminder of everything he had loved and lost." Isaac reached for her hand across the table, and this time he did not pull away quickly. His fingers were warm and calloused, his grip gentle but firm. "I am sorry," he said simply. "That is too much loss for any family to bear." "Tell me about your family," Victoria said, needing to change the subject, to think about something other than the graves in St. Louis she would never visit again. Isaac was quiet for so long she thought he might refuse, but finally he spoke. "My father was a drunk who beat my mother until I was big enough to stop him. I left home at 15, worked odd jobs, ended up enlisting when the war started because it seemed like a purpose, something worth fighting for. My mother died while I was gone. I found out 6 months after it happened in a letter from a neighbor. My father drank himself to death a year later. I have no siblings, no other family, just myself." Victoria tightened her grip on his hand. "I am sorry too," she said. "That is a hard way to grow up." "It made me strong," Isaac said, "but it also made me think I was better off alone. That caring about people, letting them close, only led to pain." He looked at her then, his eyes intense in the firelight. "I am starting to think I might have been wrong about that." The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with possibility. Victoria knew she should pull her hand away, should retreat to her side of the cabin and the safety of distance, but she did not want to. She wanted to lean forward, to close the gap between them, to find out if his lips were as warm as his hands. But Isaac released her hand and stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I should check the fire," he said, though it was burning fine. "And the horses. I will be back." He grabbed his coat and was gone before Victoria could respond, and she sat alone at the table, her hand still tingling from his touch, wondering what would have happened if he had not been quite so honorable. February brought a thaw, brief and tantalizing, melting the top layer of snow into slush before another storm swept in and froze it all solid again. They were truly trapped now. The snow crusted so hard a person could walk on top of it, but the danger of avalanches made the pass utterly impassable. Isaac checked his supplies with increasing frequency, and Victoria knew without asking that they were running lower than he had expected. They rationed the food more carefully, supplementing with what game he could catch, though the hunting was poor in the deep winter. "We will be fine," he assured her when he caught her eyeing the diminished stores. "Spring will come and with it the thaw. We just need to hold on a bit longer." But the closeness, both physical and emotional, was becoming harder to ignore. The cabin seemed to shrink as the weeks passed, and Victoria found herself hyper-aware of Isaac's every movement, the way his hair fell into his eyes when he was concentrating, the strength in his hands as he worked, the rare smile that transformed his serious face. She caught him watching her too, his gaze following her as she moved about their small space, and the tension between them grew until it was almost unbearable. It came to a head on a night in late February when another blizzard trapped them inside. They were playing cards as had become their ritual, but the game was going poorly, neither of them able to concentrate. Finally, Isaac threw down his cards in frustration. "I cannot do this," he said. "Do what?" Victoria asked, though she knew exactly what he meant. "Pretend," he said roughly. "Pretend that I do not think about you every moment. Pretend that having you here in my home, in my clothes, is not driving me to distraction. Pretend that I am some kind of gentleman when all I want is to kiss you until neither of us can breathe." Victoria's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. "Who asked you to pretend?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Isaac stared at her. "Victoria, you do not know what you are saying. You are only here because of circumstance, because of the storm. When spring comes, you will leave, go to San Francisco, start a new life. You do not want to complicate things with a mountain man who has nothing to offer you but a rough cabin and a hard life." "You do not get to tell me what I want," Victoria said, standing up. Her chair fell backward, clattering on the floor, but she ignored it. "I am not some fragile society girl who needs protecting from her own feelings, Isaac. I know exactly what I want, and it is you. It has been you since that first night when you went out in the storm to save my horse without a second thought. It has been you every day since, in every small kindness, every shared laugh, every moment of this strange, wonderful time we have had together." Isaac was on his feet too now, the table between them forgotten. "If I kiss you," he said, his voice low and intense, "I will not want to stop, and I will not be able to let you go when spring comes. You understand that? I am not a man who does things halfway, Victoria. If we cross this line, there is no going back." "Then let's not go back," Victoria said, and she was the one who moved first, closing the distance between them, rising on her toes to press her lips to his. For a moment, Isaac was still frozen, and Victoria felt a flicker of doubt. But then his arms came around her, pulling her close, and he was kissing her back with a hunger that matched her own. His lips were warm and demanding, and Victoria felt like she was melting, all the tension and restraint of the past months dissolving in the heat between them. They broke apart finally, breathing hard, and Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "We should stop," he said, though his arms did not loosen their hold. "We should," Victoria agreed, and kissed him again. They were more careful that night than Victoria's blood was urging her to be. Isaac pulled back, setting boundaries even as his hands trembled with the effort of restraint. "Not like this," he said hoarsely. "Not until we have talked about what this means, about the future. I will not dishonor you, Victoria, no matter how much I want you." Victoria wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that honor was overrated, and that she had already made her choice. But she saw the determination in his eyes and knew he would not be swayed. So instead she nodded, and they sat by the fire, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist, and talked until dawn about everything they had been too afraid to say before. "I love you," Isaac said as the first light began to filter through the window. "I did not mean to, did not want to, but I do, completely and irrevocably." "I love you too," Victoria said, and felt tears on her cheeks, though she could not have said if they were from joy or relief or the simple, overwhelming emotion of it all. "What do we do now?" "We wait for spring," Isaac said. "And when it comes, we figure out the rest together. If you still want to go to San Francisco, I will take you there. If you want to stay, we will make a life here or wherever you choose. As long as we are together, the rest is just details." March arrived with warmer winds that began, slowly, to melt the snowpack. The passes would not be clear for weeks yet, but the change in the air was palpable. They spent their days preparing for the transition, Isaac teaching Victoria the skills she would need if she chose this life. How to tend a vegetable garden, how to preserve meat, how to read the weather in the clouds and the wind. He was courting her, she realized in his own way, showing her what their life together could be. She said yes to his proposal on the 1st of April, when he asked her formally, on one knee in the muddy snow outside the cabin, with a ring he had carved from a piece of silver from his played-out mine. They married themselves that same day, speaking their vows before God in the mountains, with no witness but the hawks circling overhead and the horses in the lean-to. I, Isaac Frost, take you, Victoria Brighton, to be my lawfully wedded wife, he said, his voice strong and sure. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part. I, Victoria Brighton, take you, Isaac Frost, to be my lawfully wedded husband, Victoria repeated, her hands clasped in his. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part. He kissed her then, long and deep, and when they went back inside the cabin, there was no more talk of propriety or restraint. They came together with all the passion they had been holding back for months, learning each other's bodies with the same care and attention they had learned each other's minds and hearts. Isaac was gentle and patient, despite the hunger in his eyes, making sure Victoria's first time was everything it should be, full of tenderness and growing pleasure that left them both shaken and clinging to each other in the narrow bed. "Mine," Isaac whispered against her hair as they lay tangled together afterward. "You are mine now, and I am yours." "Always," Victoria promised, and knew she meant it with everything in her. When the passes finally cleared in early May, they rode down to Leadville together to make their marriage legal in the eyes of the law. The clerk looked at them askance, this rough-dressed mountain man and the woman in his too large clothes, but he took their information and filed the necessary papers without comment. They bought supplies with the last of Victoria's money, and some silver Isaac traded, stocking up on seeds and tools and fabric for Victoria to make herself proper clothes. "Are you sure about this?" Isaac asked her one last time as they prepared to ride back up the mountain. "I could still take you to Denver, put you on a train to San Francisco. Your aunt might still take you in." Victoria looked at him, at this man she had come to know and love over the long winter months, at the life they had built together in that tiny cabin, and shook her head. "This is my choice, Isaac. You are my choice, now and always." They returned to the cabin as husband and wife and set about making it into a true home. Victoria planted a garden in the small clearing near the lean-to, vegetables and herbs and even some flowers from seeds she had bought in town. Isaac expanded the cabin, adding a second room and a real bedroom, building furniture from the trees he cleared. They worked side by side through the summer, their bodies growing strong and tanned, their love deepening with each shared task. In August, Victoria realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, the signs familiar from things her mother had told her, and from women's talk she had overheard back in St. Louis, but she waited to be sure before telling Isaac. When she finally did, over supper one evening, he went perfectly still. "A baby," he said, his voice strangled. "We are going to have a baby." "Yes," Victoria said, watching his face anxiously. "In the spring, I think, March or April." For a long moment, Isaac did not move, did not speak, and Victoria felt fear grip her heart. But then he was on his feet, pulling her up into his arms, spinning her around despite her laughing protests to be careful. "A baby," he said again, and she could hear the wonder in his voice, see the tears in his eyes. "We are going to be parents, Tori. I am going to be a father. Are you happy?" she asked, though she could see the answer in his face. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Isaac said, setting her down gently and placing his hand on her still flat stomach. "Terrified, amazed, grateful beyond words, but yes, my love, I am happy." They spent the winter preparing, Isaac fashioning a cradle from pine wood, and Victoria sewing tiny clothes from soft fabric they bought on another trip to Leadville. They argued good-naturedly about names, Isaac favoring strong traditional names while Victoria wanted something more lyrical. In the end, they decided to wait until they met their child, to see what name seemed to fit. The baby came in late March of 1880, on a night when spring was just beginning to touch the mountain. Victoria labored through the night with Isaac beside her, holding her hand, wiping her brow, whispering encouragement even though she could see the fear in his eyes. They had planned to ride down to Leadville when her time came to find a midwife or a doctor, but the baby came early and fast, giving them no choice but to face it alone. "You can do this," Isaac said as another contraction gripped her. "You are the strongest person I know, Tori. You rode through a blizzard, survived a winter in the mountains, built a life from nothing. You can do this." And she did with Isaac's help, bringing their son into the world as dawn broke over the peaks. The baby's first cry was the most beautiful sound Victoria had ever heard, and when Isaac placed him in her arms, wrapped in a blanket she had sewn, she wept with joy and relief. "He is perfect," Isaac said, his voice thick with emotion. "You are perfect, both of you." They named him James after Victoria's younger brother, and Isaac's middle name became the baby's as well, James William Frost. He had his father's dark hair and his mother's blue eyes, and from the first moment, he had them both wrapped around his tiny fingers. Life in the mountains was hard with a baby, harder than Victoria had anticipated. James was colicky and cried often, especially in the night, and she was exhausted in a way she had never known before. But Isaac was a devoted father, walking the floor with his son when Victoria needed rest, singing soft songs in a voice she had never heard him use before, changing diapers and heating bottles of goat's milk when Victoria's own milk proved insufficient without complaint. "I never knew," he said one night, holding James while the baby finally slept. "I never knew I could love like this, that my heart could hold this much." Victoria understood. She had thought she loved Isaac completely during their courtship and early marriage, but watching him with their son added new dimensions to her feelings, deepening and enriching what was already there. They were a family now, bound together not just by choice, but by the life they had created. As James grew from infant to toddler, sturdy and curious and full of mischief, they expanded their life on the mountain. Isaac built a larger barn for the animals they acquired, chickens for eggs, a milk cow, more horses. Victoria's garden flourished, providing vegetables through the summer that she learned to preserve for winter. They made occasional trips to Leadville for supplies, and for the social contact, they both needed more than they had realized, attending church services and town gatherings, making friends among the other hardy souls who had chosen this rough country. There were challenges. A hard winter in 1882, when they nearly ran out of food and had to slaughter one of the horses to survive. A summer when drought threatened their garden and they had to haul water from the creek bucket by bucket to save their crops. Times when Victoria missed the civilization she had left behind, the music and books and conversation, and times when Isaac grew silent and withdrawn, haunted by memories of the war that still troubled his sleep. But they weathered each challenge together, learning to lean on each other, to communicate through the hard times as well as the good. And there were so many good times. James's first steps, taken between his parents with both of them cheering. The night Victoria told Isaac she was pregnant again, and his whoop of joy that made James clap his hands and laugh. The slow, sweet building of a life that was wholly theirs, beholden to no one but themselves and each other. Their daughter was born in the summer of 1883, an easier birth than James had been, as if Victoria's body knew what to do the second time around. They named her Margaret after Isaac's mother, called her Maggie from the start. She had her mother's dark hair and her father's whiskey-colored eyes, and a disposition so sunny that she rarely cried even as an infant. "We are blessed," Victoria said one evening, watching Isaac play with both children on the floor of their cabin while she prepared supper. "I know life is hard here, Isaac, but I would not trade it for anything. This is everything I did not know I wanted." Isaac looked up at her, his face transformed by a smile. "I love you, Tori," he said. "Thank you for getting lost in that blizzard. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for building this life with me." "I love you too," Victoria said, and meant it with her whole heart. As the years passed, their family grew and their homestead prospered. Another son came in 1885, William, named for Isaac's middle name and born during a spring thunderstorm that James, now 5, insisted meant his brother would be a great warrior. They added rooms to the cabin, until it was barely recognizable from the single-room shelter where Victoria had first stumbled in from the storm. Isaac taught the children to ride and hunt and fish, while Victoria taught them to read and write and figure, using books she ordered from Denver and teaching them herself since the nearest school was too far away for daily attendance. In 1887, they made a decision that changed their lives once more. Leadville was booming again with a new silver strike, and Isaac proposed moving the family to town for the winters so the children could attend proper school and Victoria could have the company of other women. They kept the mountain cabin for summers, but having a house in town opened new opportunities for all of them. Victoria discovered a talent for business, helping Isaac invest his savings from the mine wisely, and eventually opening a small shop that sold her preserves and handiwork to the mining families. Isaac found work as a guide for wealthy hunters and tourists who wanted to experience the wilderness with a knowledgeable companion, and the money was better than trapping had ever been. But every summer, they returned to the mountain, to the cabin where their love had been forged in isolation and hardship, and to the simple life they both still craved. The children ran wild in the high meadows, fishing the streams and climbing the pines, and Victoria and Isaac would sit on the porch they had built, watching the sunset paint the peaks in shades of gold and rose. "You ever regret it?" Isaac asked one such evening when the children were finally asleep and they had the peace to themselves. "Leaving your old life behind. You could have married well back in St. Louis, had a mansion and servants and all the comforts." Victoria looked at him, at this man who had been her savior and her partner and her greatest love, and shook her head. "I have all the comforts I need," she said. "I have you and our children and this life we have built together. That is worth more than any mansion." Isaac pulled her close and they sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the mountain. The hoot of an owl, the rustle of wind through the pines, the distant howl of a wolf. This was home, Victoria thought. Not the cabin or the townhouse, but wherever Isaac was, wherever their family was together. More children came, another daughter in 1889 and a final son in 1891, and the Frost family became well known in Leadville as hardworking, honest, and devoted to each other. The older children helped with the younger ones, and Victoria marveled at how James, now a gangly adolescent, was so gentle with his baby brother, and how Maggie mothered her younger siblings with a patience beyond her years. Isaac's hair began to gray at the temples, and Victoria found her first silver strands, but they wore their age proudly, as evidence of the life they had lived fully and well. They celebrated their 15th wedding anniversary quietly, just the two of them, leaving the children with trusted friends for a rare night alone. "You remember the blizzard?" Victoria asked, lying in Isaac's arms in the hotel room they had rented as a treat. "Every day," Isaac said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I thank God for that storm, Tori. It brought me the greatest gift of my life." "We played cards for warmth," Victoria said, smiling at the memory. "Two strangers trying to pass the time. I never imagined where it would lead." "By spring we were playing house," Isaac added, his arms tightening around her. "And we have been playing for real ever since. The best game I ever won." As the new century approached, bringing changes to Colorado and to the West they had known, the Frost family adapted and thrived. James went to college in Denver, studying to be an engineer. Maggie married a young rancher from outside town, a good man who treated her with the respect and love she deserved. The younger children were still at home, still learning, still growing. Isaac and Victoria, now in their 40s, found themselves with a bit more time alone than they had enjoyed in years. They used it to travel some, visiting San Francisco finally, so Victoria could see the city she had once planned to make her home. They found her aunt, still alive and thrilled to meet the family Victoria had created. "You did well for yourself," her aunt said, after hearing the story of how Victoria and Isaac had met. "Better than you would have done here, I think. You found real love, real partnership. That is rarer than silver." Back in Colorado, they bought a larger house in Leadville, anticipating grandchildren and family gatherings. Isaac retired from guiding, content to help Victoria with her now thriving business and to spend time with his children. They still spent summers at the mountain cabin, though, unwilling to give up that connection to their roots. It was on one such summer evening in 1899 that Victoria and Isaac sat on their porch and took stock of their lives. Their children were grown or growing, healthy and happy. They had weathered financial panics and harsh winters, illness and injury, the normal trials of life, and come through stronger for it. They had built something lasting, something real. "We did it," Victoria said softly, her hand in Isaac's. "We built the life we wanted." "We did," Isaac agreed. "Together, just like we said we would." They sat in silence, comfortable and complete, as the sun set over the mountains that had witnessed their love story. From inside the cabin came the sounds of their younger children playing, and in the distance, the call of a hawk. Victoria thought back to that frightened girl who had stumbled into this cabin 21 years ago, running from a life she did not want, and marveled at how far she had come. She had found not just shelter from the storm, but a home, a love, a purpose. She had found Isaac and he had found her, and together they had created something beautiful out of the harsh wilderness. "I love you," she said, the words as true and powerful as the first time she had spoken them. "I love you too," Isaac replied, raising her hand to his lips. "My Tori, my wife. My heart." As the years continued to pass, their family expanded with grandchildren, and their home became a gathering place for the generations. James married and gave them 2 grandchildren, a boy and a girl who looked remarkably like their grandfather. Maggie had her first baby in 1900, a son she named Isaac in honor of the grandfather he resembled. The younger Frost children were finding their own paths, courting and planning their futures, and Isaac and Victoria watched it all with pride and joy. In the summer of 1902, the entire extended family gathered at the mountain cabin for a celebration of Isaac and Victoria's 24th anniversary. The cabin could not hold everyone, so tents were pitched in the meadow, and a long table was set up outside for the feast. There was laughter and music, grandchildren running through the trees, and stories told and retold of the blizzard that had brought it all about. Tell us again, Grandma, young Isaac begged, climbing into Victoria's lap. Tell us about the storm. Victoria looked at her husband, and he smiled, nodding permission. So she told the story once more, of the desperate ride through the mountains, the cabin appearing like a miracle through the snow, the stranger who had saved her life. She told of the long winter, the card games, the slow building of trust and friendship and finally love. She told of their private marriage ceremony and the life they had built together, brick by brick and year by year. The children listened, rapt, even though most had heard the tale many times before. It was their origin story, the beginning of everything they knew and loved. As the evening wore on and the children were put to bed, Isaac and Victoria found themselves alone again on their porch, just as they had been so many times before. The stars were brilliant overhead, undimmed by city lights, and the air was cool and sweet with the scent of pine. "We have had a good life," Isaac said, his voice reflective. "Better than I ever dreamed possible." "The best," Victoria agreed. "And it is not over yet. We have years ahead of us still, my love. More sunsets to watch, more grandchildren to spoil, more mornings to wake up beside you." "I will take every single one," Isaac said, pulling her close. "And thank God for each day I get with you." They kissed then, long and sweet, with all the passion and tenderness of nearly a quarter-century together. When they finally pulled apart, Victoria rested her head on Isaac's shoulder and sighed with deep contentment. Below them, in the meadow, their family slept safe and sound. Around them, the mountains stood eternal, witnesses to the love that had bloomed in the heart of winter and grown strong enough to last all seasons. And above them, the stars wheeled through the sky, marking time's passage while their love remained constant. The blizzard had passed long ago, but its gift remained, as fresh and vital as the day Victoria had stumbled through that door seeking shelter and found instead her home, her purpose, her heart's true companion. They had played cards for warmth through that long winter, two strangers learning to trust each other. By spring, they had been playing house, practicing at partnership. And now, decades later, they were living the reality of a love that had started in desperation and become the foundation of a legacy that would outlast them both. As they sat together under the stars, Victoria knew that if she had it all to do over again, she would not change a single moment. The fear, the cold, the uncertainty of that winter had all been worth it for this. For Isaac's hand in hers, for the family they had created, for the life they had built together in these wild mountains. "Thank you," she whispered against his shoulder. "For what?" Isaac asked. "For taking in a stranger during a storm, for teaching me to play cards, for loving me, for all of it." Isaac pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Thank you for being brave enough to run into the unknown, for trusting me, for choosing this life, for being my partner in everything. I would do it all again, Tori. Every single moment if it meant ending up right here with you." They stayed on the porch until the moon rose high, content in their silence, in the simple pleasure of being together. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, the continuation of the life they had chosen. But tonight, they were simply Isaac and Victoria, the mountain man and the runaway heiress, who had found each other in the heart of winter and built a love strong enough to weather any storm. Inside the cabin, the fire burned low, and outside the mountains stood sentinel. The cards they had played that first winter were long since lost or worn beyond use, but the warmth they had kindled together burned as bright as ever, a flame that would pass to their children and their children's children, lighting the way for generations yet to come. This was the legacy of that blizzard, of that chance meeting, of two people who had been brave enough to open their hearts when circumstances threw them together. Not just a love story, but a life well lived, full of purpose and joy, and the kind of partnership that transforms two individuals into something greater than themselves. As the night deepened and the temperature dropped, Isaac and Victoria finally went inside, banking the fire and climbing into the bed they had shared for so many years. They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, just as they had that first spring when they had married themselves before God and the mountains, and just as they would every night for the rest of their lives. The story that had begun with a desperate ride through a blizzard and a stranger's kindness had become a tale of enduring love, of family, of a life built on trust and partnership, and the courage to choose happiness even when the path was uncertain. And as the Colorado night wrapped around the cabin and the sleeping family within, the mountains kept their vigil, eternal and unchanging, while the love of Isaac and Victoria Frost continued to grow, as constant and life-giving as the spring thaw that followed even the harshest winter.